As you know, this is the Ontario chapter of Fenestration Canada, Friday, July 28th. Brief overview of what we're going to be doing. 1 o'clock is the starting time. I'm just going to be doing some brief introductions of the team, as well as Mr. Gupta. I'm also going to provide a very quick synopsis of what session 1 was, and then we'll jump right into Anil's presentation. We have a timeline of approximately 2:15, 2:30 to give a little bit of leeway for questions and answers at the end. But if you have any questions during, I believe just raising your hand, the icon will appear for us as administrators, or as we've been informed, the dialogue box is available if you want to type in a question. So without further ado, Jason Waddell, I'm not sure if the gentleman's on the call right now, but he is the chair of the Ontario committee. Myself, Ontario co-chair, Tarek Eloua, also co-chair, and Mr. John Greeley, as well co-chair, Stefan Labelle, executive director of Fenestration Canada, and Isabel, who helped put this together. Thank you very much. She will also be on the call. Brief intro of Mr. Gupta, Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt Consultant. He has a 8020 Accelerate Coach and Program co-founder, which is essentially leadership training for executives and organizational culture. And the way I actually became familiar or befriended Mr. Gupta, he was my instructor at U of T, which he instructs at U of T as well as McMaster in Lean Six Sigma. Below, I've provided his LinkedIn contact information if he's one or so inclined. Very quickly, session 1 recap. On March 31st of this past year, my company, Frank, hosted an event where we had approximately 30 to 40 people come to my facility. We did a quick walk around just to kind of show people kind of some of the lean initiatives that we've undertaken, automation, Kanban systems, information boards, just showing kind of the level of transparency that we use lean manufacturing to assist us with. And from his presentation, these are the main takeaways. One being great organizations choose to be so. So there's a conscious choice for Southwest Airlines, Apple, companies of that ilk to be better and be leaders in their industries. But obviously they have to believe in themselves and obviously build a culture in which there is trust in the executive decision-making and management team. Secondarily, customer-focused goal setting. I mean, this is rather self-explanatory. The customer is the single source of purpose, reason for being, and measure of success for any organization. You're not going to be, making chairs. If you're in a window and door industry, you're going to make the best quality windows that your customer base is looking for. Excellence in process management. The quality of a process and how it integrates the organizational elements is the most important factor of the organization's ability to consistently meet customers' needs. Again, this is just aligning the goals with the logic behind those goals. How do we achieve those goals? What are the metrics? What are the KPIs that we are interested in as an organization that will lead us to achieving those goals, customer-centric goals? And finally, a highly engaged workforce. Employees are often the greatest source of knowledge in an organization. They know customers, process problems, root causes, and solutions better than anyone else. I think that we all have experienced this sometimes in our, project management, that we kind of tend not to go to the source and think that maybe the guys on the floor, the women on the floor don't have the knowledge base to contribute to a high level process. I believe it couldn't be any further from the truth. There is an expression, go to Gemba, which is essentially go to the floor and go and see what's going on, what's taking place, and get the input from employees. So I think Mr. Gupta is going to hit this home a little further, but you're not going to have success if you don't have buy-in. And if you have buy-in, that means you have a highly engaged workforce, and it kind of it lends one to the other. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Gupta, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Awesome, Marco. Thank you very much for that. Very, very kind. And welcome everybody once again. Thank you for joining us today. Well, I had actually a little bit of an introduction myself. I had a couple of slides to show you, but it seems like Mark already took did that piece for me, but I will still start there and build off exactly that. So thank you for joining us. I hope everybody can see my screen now. Somebody give me just a little thumbs up or a quick nod.
Yep, we can see.
All right,
yep.
Super, thank you. So I've called this presentation our part 2 of our journey to excellence. And so we're going to build off of what we talked about in our March session. In March, we were talking a little bit about the fundamental building blocks. Today, we'll go a little bit deeper using one particular set of tools, which I think are the starting point for any organization's journey. So as each one of us, we think about our organization and how we get from where we are to where we could be, right, to the highest possible potential of our organization, our team members. This journey, the starting point is really what I'll be focusing on today. Along the way, if you have any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate. The Q&A section is live, so you can always type it in. I'm going to try and keep an eye on the Q&A, but sometimes my mind is elsewhere. So in the event that I overlook a Q&A, please feel free, anybody, to just interrupt. And you can ask a question. You can also just interrupt me and ask a question at any time. Always better to ask questions as we go. Even though time is a little bit scarce, I have only about 45, maybe 50 minutes, and we have a lot to cover. But it's better to ask questions along the way. It helps everybody understand a little bit deeper. And of course, it's more relevant at that time while we're talking about something. So my introduction's already been done, but for those of you who are new and just joining us and were not with us in the March session, I've been doing this Lean Six Sigma work for over 2 decades now, worked in a variety of different organizations in pretty much every industry you can think about. And the reason I emphasize this is that these tools and concepts, they may have been developed outside of our industry, but we now have ample evidence, many decades of work to show that this is actually applicable in every organization, in every industry, irrespective of where you are in your own journey, irrespective of what you do, what industry you're in, and what organization you're in. Also, organizations are at different places. Some organizations are a little bit ahead than others. And for them, the exact same tools still apply, okay? Their application may be a little bit different, but the fundamental concepts and many of the tools still apply. You may be just taking the first step. You may be a very small organization just starting up, or you are a very mature organization that has a global presence. These fundamental concepts are universal across industry and organization. At the same time, I'd like to also, in my work, of course, I do a lot of Lean Six Sigma and implementation and training. I also do, over the last 15 years or so, I've done a lot of strategy building with organizations, as well as coaching management and leadership teams on building high performance organizations, building the right culture of teamwork, accountability, and daily management. Why I emphasize those two things is that as we look at this work, we tend to focus on the tangible, the process view, the tools, and the improvement that happens on the shop floor. What is often overlooked, but is an integral part of the long-term journey, is to have the right strategy in place and the right strategic conversations, the right strategic decision-making considerations, taking our organization, the industry, the competitors, the customer view, and so on. Strategy is an important part of this excellence journey. Just improving anything is really not the purpose of this, but being very strategic about it. At the same time, the organization is actually a combination of human behavior. It is our employees and our team members that make the organization. And therefore, building that right culture, that high performance teamwork, that is an integral part of any organization's success. And once again, it has to be consciously built. It does not just happen. Culture evolves, but it can actually be impacted, and it can be a conscious choice by leaders. My work often involves all of these three because they need to be happening at the same time in any organization in this journey. Okay. With that, Very quick launch point from our last session. We talked about the need for continuous improvement. And I just want to once again anchor this work in our conversation in this need. That essential for survival, the need for continuous improvement is not an optional piece of work. This is not something I will do the week when we are not busy, or in the few months of the year that work is not as busy. This needs to be continuously done. Just as important as it is for us to do everyday work, it is equally important for us to be continuously improving, essential for basic bare survival. And we are all trying to do this. There is no question or no doubt that all of us in our own ways, we are attempting to improve. Okay, we all are constantly trying in one way or another, whether it is ongoing problem solving, whether it is investment in infrastructure, whether it is other things. And yet only a few organizations excel. I came across a really interesting report on this a few weeks ago. Fairly extensive study showed that nearly in every industry, there are 400 industry segments in North America. In those 400, 95% of those 400 industry segments, each one of them has only 4 companies that dominates and has the 80% of the market share nearly in every industry, right? When it comes to profit, when it comes to market share and so on, only very, very few organizations truly excel. Why is this? In our last session, we talked about 4 interdependent practices. And Marco touched on these as well. Excellence as a choice we have to make. We say it, do we truly understand what that choice is and how that choice is made and what the implications of that choice is? It's one thing to say, yes, I want to be excellent. It is another to say, what does that truly mean? What do I have to give up? What do I have to learn? What do I have to change? That choice of doing the hard work, okay, doing things that we don't even know need to be done. That is the choice that we have to make. The second, of course, is customer focus. Customer here, the definition of customer, please keep in mind, it is not just the end customer. It is 4 customer groups that simultaneously need to be looked after. Our end customers, our employees, our financial stakeholders, the ownership group, as well as community and society at large. 4 customer groups, and therefore goal setting on that. In our last session, we also introduced the concept of a balanced scorecard, a very, very powerful tool. One that I would strongly emphasize as a starting point of this journey for any organization. Once we know what the goals are set from a customer view, then it's a matter of how do we execute. And for that, excellence in process management. Today, we will spend a lot of time with the fundamental building blocks of process management. Nothing rocket science here, but yet some very, very easy and yet very, very difficult. Easy to understand and learn, easy to see the value, hard to do. Okay, so we're going to be talking about a number of tools there. And of course, highly engaged people and the cultural piece, which these tools, once again, will help us to get to that highly engaged people. In our last session, we also talked about how there have been 2 process improvement methodologies that have developed and evolved in the industry over the last about 80 years of work, and therefore are tried and tested, extensively used in the industry. And so what we're talking about is not something, brand new. There is new names, there is new, sometimes a flavor. However, the fundamentals remain pretty much the same. One of those 2 was called Six Sigma, first designed in the 1980s by Motorola, where it brought together a lot of quality thinking that was in the industry at that time, and since then has evolved to continuously add to that body of knowledge. Six Sigma remains the heart and core of all high-performance organizations, whether you call it Six Sigma, whether you call it excellence, whether you call it process transformation, whatever. The second methodology, which is the one that we will talk about a little bit more today, was developed by Toyota. This is called Lean, first designed in the 1950s, started to design it in the 1950s, and we've understood it now for about 30 years. We studied and documented it in the 1980s. It was in 1989 that we first coined the term Lean. to represent what Toyota does in their continuous improvement methodology. This is the one. This is where I'm going to focus today's conversation on. So with that, let's get into this. This was a recap of what we had done in our last session. I see that there are no questions at this time. Please don't hesitate to ask if you have any. So let's start with a quick look at Lean. And why is it that we are talking about a methodology and a bunch of tools that came from the automotive industry, that came from one company? Okay, why is it that, Marco, you are speaking Japanese to us suddenly, talking about Gemba and talking about Andon and talking about all these, and I will be introducing some additional Japanese words to you. Why are we doing this? Well, it's worthwhile for us to keep in mind where Lean evolved from and what is our basis and the reason why so much of the industry has focused on Lean. Lean was developed by Toyota. It took them about 20 years to fully develop this toolkit. But when we think about Lean as both the methodology, the concepts, tools, and techniques, we have to keep in mind that they were designed by Toyota for their ongoing problems. The good thing was that Toyota's view on their problems was a process-centric view. Often, when we look at problems, we look at quality from a particular product point of view, from an automation point of view, from our own people point of view. Sometimes a combination of these, but generally it tends to be a little bit siloed. Toyota was always of the view from the beginning that it is about a process. This is the reason why it becomes very, very applicable. It is this view, it is this approach of their methodology to constantly solve their problems, which has been largely credited by researchers and by management scholars around the world as the driving force for their success especially over the last 40 years. The first 20, 30 years, they certainly caught up to the rest of the world. But over the last 40 years, where they are today, we can see very clearly how far ahead they are. It's also noteworthy that if a set of tools or concepts can be successful for 40 years, then it is not a one-time deal. It's not a flash in the pan, okay? But a fundamental set of tools that continues to help and continues to help us improve and grow. So when I talk about their success, what do we mean? Well, here's some interesting facts. I think you'll find these interesting. They are the largest automotive manufacturer in the world. They make more cars than anybody else. Every year, making over 10 million vehicles and selling 10 million vehicles around the world. They are usually the only company on the planet. There have been 1 or 2 years when Volkswagen has also made 10 million, but otherwise they're the only company automotive company that makes 10 million cars every year in a global market of about 60 million. So you can see they're just under 20% market share globally. But in addition to having large numbers, just volume, they are also consistently rated as the highest quality product, ahead of very high-end luxury vehicles, the Porsche, which is hand-built in many ways, BMW, Mercedes, very expensive, high-end and vehicles. So a Toyota, which is a mainstream vehicle, having a better quality every single year, rated ahead of high-end luxury and very expensive. And technologically very, very advanced, right? BMW and Mercedes, nothing against them. They are extremely good vehicles and extremely good technology and so on. And yet Toyota, from a quality perspective, consistently rated ahead. But it's not just about their product. Here we go back now to our definition of customer. They've been rated to have best-in-class employee satisfaction, engagement of employees, whether we look at it from a turnover perspective, whether we look at absenteeism within their plants, and overall employee satisfaction, engagement scores, voluntary involvement in activities that the organization is doing, and so on. Best-in-class employee satisfaction. Health and safety record, second to none. Among the most safest workplaces, despite being heavy industry and all of that. and a undeniably an incredible environmental record as well. And so reducing, recycling, and reusing everything. Many of their plants, absolutely zero waste. Nothing goes to landfill. 100% recycling, all packaging material recycled, reused. It is possible to do that. Okay. And all of this, of course, leads to becoming financially outstanding performance. Among the most profitable and among the most valuable automotive companies in the world. For sure, some of you will point out to me that Tesla right now is ahead of Toyota from a value perspective. Absolutely is true, and there is definitely a lot going for Tesla. And I'm actually not here to say that others are not good. Many American companies, American automotive, have advanced quite a bit, and their quality is improving. However, when we compare them to Toyota, still overall a balanced view, Toyota's performance pretty much ahead of not just any other automotive company, often recognized to be among the most high-performing organizations from an overall perspective in any industry. Okay, so lots of good reason for us to look at lean as probably a methodology and a tools and concepts that might work for just about anybody. So then what is lean? Let's start by giving a little definition. Okay, let's get a little bit deeper, come up with a definition of lean. Here is a definition, many definitions out there, and some of you may have seen definitions elsewhere. I've picked a definition from the literature, from the books that have been written, the research that has been done on Toyota and lean. And I particularly like this because it's simple and captures the essence of the lean journey. It is a set of principles, concepts, tools, and techniques. So it is not just one thing, but it's a bunch of things, okay, that have been brought together. A lot of principles and concepts and tools and techniques. Today, what I would like to do is actually give you or talk about, introduce 3 different things. One of them is a concept, one of them is a technique, one of them is a tool. So we'll touch on each one of these today. It's a whole bunch of things, okay? But they're all designed for only one thing, the elimination of waste. This word waste, and we'll define this in more detail today as well, elimination of waste. But this elimination of waste is not a one-time deal, okay? In fact, you will never, ever actually achieve the ultimate end state of complete elimination of waste. It is therefore a relentless pursuit. So once again here, the notion that we can do lean for a while, or we'll do it at a particular time, or Friday afternoons is to do continuous improvement in lean is maybe flawed. It is a relentless pursuit every single day, every single person. Thinking about, just like we think about work, we also think about continuous improvement. That's what brings lean to life. That's what allows us to really get to the ultimate goal. And what is that ultimate goal? It is to produce a just-in-time system. That is the long-term view. And the reality is, it doesn't matter whether you absolutely get there, okay? Because 70 years after they started their journey, Toyota is not there. And so the long-term view of just-in-time is a directional view that we are now striving to move towards. That just-in-time system, it'll deliver to our customers exactly what they need. Exactly what they need. No more and no less. This is an important part. We sometimes feel if I do more than the customer wants, that's actually better. In actual fact, it's not. Customers want something. It's our job, therefore, to ensure that we understand exactly what they need and deliver exactly that. When they need it, no earlier and no later. Never, ever late. In the right quantity, in the right sequence, if there is a sequence. Often with products and services, there's a sequence. One thing comes after the other. It needs to be delivered in the right sequence without any defects and at the lowest possible cost. If we think about this definition from our view, we are customers, we are consumers of products and services every single day. If you think about it from your own point of view, I think we will all, this will resonate with you. What you want is exactly what you want when you need it in the right quantity, in the right sequence, without defects, at the lowest possible cost. Whether it is getting on a plane and going traveling somewhere, whether it's going to a restaurant and being served a meal, whether it's going to the grocery store and buying everyday groceries and produce and so on, this is exactly what we want. We want this from everybody who supplies us anything, or whether we look at it from our own business perspective, our suppliers, what do we want from them? We want exactly what we want when we need it, the right quantity, right sequence, without defects, at the lowest possible cost. And hence you can see the application of this. We have used this definition in hospitals. That's what patients want. The patient walking into an emergency room, they want exactly what they need when they need it, not 5 hours later, in the right quantity, in the right sequence, and at the lowest possible cost, obviously. So very applicable definition. That is what lean is all about. To understand lean, getting down to the next level, I'd like to introduce 3 lean concepts, tools, principles, techniques, 3 of them. These 3 I have chosen to talk about today because they are the starting point, the base. And I will also say this, and I obviously do not know everybody in all your organizations that have joined us today, but in my own experience of working with organizations around the world in nearly every industry, I find these 3 to be both very simple and easy to understand, very commonsensical. This should resonate with most of us, and yet in most organizations, very poorly done. Okay. And hence, I think it's a great starting point for us all as we start this journey to think about these 3 and think about how we can bring them into our organization as the starting point for setting us up for success. The first is this very simple concept of standardization of work. To start this, in the meantime, no questions so far. Okay, good. So if you do have any, please don't hesitate to ask. Standardization of work. This actually goes back to 110 years ago, where among the first quality and process researchers were looking at how work is done in industry, in organizations, everywhere. And this was among the first things that was identified. A man called Frederick Taylor in 1911 identified the need for standard work, that there is a best way of doing every single job, howsoever small and trivial it is. There is a right way of doing it, one best right way. And that, as the starting point for all improvement, where all work in every organization needs to be standardized, is the first and starting point for any improvement journey. Standardized work. As I say, it is one of the most powerful, and also I will say it is one of the least used process tools. Many organizations do have SOPs, standard operating procedures, may have standard work instructions, may have standards of some sort or kind. But how often, how much are they used? And how are they used? How are they documented? Okay. Are they in a file, written down on sheets of paper, in a folder somewhere? How are they operationalized? That is the important thing of standardized work. Standardized work is not equal to having a standard of work. Standardized work means you have a standard for work and that you actually have operationalized it. It needs to start with a simple written or picture description of the safest way to do something, to produce the highest quality and the most efficient way. All 3 of those things. Okay. Very, very clearly and easily written down, identified, and that has to be trained on to every single employee. The focus, therefore, has got to be on our team members and our employee. How are they doing the work? Howsoever small, howsoever trivial it is. It's not about the equipment, not about the material. And therefore, a critical starting point for both training, reference, for process control, for problem solving, for continuous improvement. In the world of lean, in the world of continuous improvement, in fact, even in the world of Six Sigma, we often say, if you have no standard, you can have no improvement. You just cannot improve. And to illustrate this point, I'd like to, with your permission, share with you a personal story about how the absence of standard work allows for anything to be done and no improvement to ever take place. I'd like to share this about my wife. My wife's a really good cook. And I really, really enjoy her cooking. However, for her, cooking is not a recipe-based activity. It is an art form. She'll open the refrigerator, look what's inside. She'll think about what she feels like. She'll look at some ingredients, and she'll say, I'm going to make something. And then she makes something. Along the way, testing it as she goes, sometimes calls me about, can you test this, taste this, and see if this is great? I look at her and say, where's your recipe? She says, I don't have no recipe. I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it the way I feel like doing it. I'm going to add a little bit more. She tastes something. I think I'm going to add a little bit. This is going to go well with this. So she will, for her, it's an art form. Okay. It's no standard work. And so in the end, what happens? Some days dinner is so good, I look at her and say, can we have exactly this meal every single day? I could eat this very dish every day for the rest of my life. And she looks at me and says, you got lucky today. Some other days, I take a few bites and she asked me, how is it? I look at her, smile and say, terrific. Just don't ever make this again, right? Why? Because it didn't quite get there. And she looked at me and say, well, just your luck. All right, just didn't work out. So but here's the thing. When I say to her, we should do the exact same dish every single day, her response is, I don't know how, it just worked out. So there is no ability for me to capture the learning of what actually worked. And the day that it did not work out, there was no ability for us no attempt can be made even to say, let's not do that again, because we just don't know what we did. And so that is the power of standardized work. It's a very, very simple concept, as you can see. In nearly every organization, there's a tremendous amount of tribal knowledge. People have figured it out. Many at the front line, they know how to do the work really, really well, but it's all in their hands. It's all in their head. This is the difference between knowing versus knowledge. They know how to do it, but there is no knowledge. The typical organization is rich in knowing and very poor in knowledge, which is why people leave and the knowing goes. And new people have to almost start afresh, and therefore so much variation in organizations. 3 key things to think about, 3 rules for standardized work. The first, standardized work must always be it should be very, very simple. 1 page. I always insist, if you cannot write it on 1 page, it's too complex to be taught and trained to people. Always try and do it 1 page. It should be visualized, more pictures rather than words. Okay, today we have the technology to do this. Take pictures, put it down 1 sheet. 1, 2, 3, 4, here's the steps that need to be done. Here's pictures. Sometimes even going 1 step further and actually having a video. But pictures, visual, so much more powerful. And secondly, it must be displayed at the workplace. Even though workers do not need to necessarily always refer to it, having it displayed at the workplace does a number of things. First off, keeps reminding them the need for standard work. Secondly, if they need to, they can always refer to it. And thirdly, of course, we'll come to that in a moment, it is the basis of audit. The second rule for standardized work, all training must be based on our standard work. Okay, standard work instructions. Simple and logical as it sounds, the typical organization, new employees are, when they join, they are often trained by somebody. They'll shadow somebody. They're just trained or expected to learn as you go, rather than use the standard work as the basis for all training, and then use the same standard work as the basis for the supervisors to do their jobs. This also highlights one fact. We don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but I do want to just make a quick mention. A critical part of supervisors' work has got to be to ensure standard work is followed. Just by doing this, a lot of ongoing problems that happen in the typical organization will start to go away. Okay. Why? Because and I'm sure all of you have had this experience, so many issues, so many quality defects, so many things go wrong because, well, we did not follow a standard. Without standards, anything is acceptable. That's the power of standardized work. And the third rule, really important. How should you determine standardized work? So first off, it should be based on current known reproducible best practice. This bullet, I think, is really important for me. It is about what we know today. Let's capture the current knowing that's in people's heads and through their experience, the best practice, okay? But it must be reproducible. Sometimes a team member may have special skills, may have special experience, may have special abilities, right, to do something. That should not be made standard work because they can do it, but others will not be able to. Okay, if something takes too long for people to learn because it is a special skill, then you cannot really standardize that. So it should be current, known, reproducible best practice. That is how the standard work needs to be identified. However, while standardized work is about stability and ensuring adherence to stability to that standard work, it is also recognized that it should be relatively easy to change if we find a better best practice. And how do we do that? Because everybody is following the exact same standard, now problems become visual, very easily identifiable. This is the constant problem we have with this standard work. And therefore it can be problem solved and a better process can be developed. And so it is a little bit of a balance between stable, unchanging standard work and standard work as the basis for continuously changing. But you change only when problem is identified in standard work, it is solved, and a better practice is now identified. Standardized work. Any questions or comments or thoughts from anyone? Okay, I don't see any. So with that, I'll move on then to the second lean concept. Now, many of you may already be familiar with this. But as we start to think now about process and process improvement, this is at the core of lean thinking, the elimination of waste, the ultimate elimination of all waste. The word muda, many of you may have heard, is the Japanese word for waste. And so here we are, learning a little bit more Japanese today, the elimination of muda. So this is once again, a very, very simple concept that Toyota developed in the early 1950s. They found it really, really powerful to give it a name, and therefore the concept of muda as a word, rather than call it waste. Our typical understanding of waste is waste that is produced as a natural part of production, and therefore what's in the garbage bin is waste. When you give it a new name, now people can start to conceptualize it differently. And therefore it becomes part of the terminology in the organization. An important part of continuous improvement, therefore, is to both understand what the concept of muda is, how it helps, and how everybody now needs to be involved with the identification and removal, ultimately getting to the elimination of all muda. Let's explore muda a little bit. Toyota in the 1950s identified 7 different types of process wastes. And in later years, added an 8th type of waste, which is the underutilized human capability, the one here at the end, which is an organizational waste. 7 process wastes and 1 organizational waste. Together, 8 different types of waste. We find nearly every organization has a huge amount of this waste in any process that you look at. And therefore, it becomes a really good anchor point for us to look at improvement, identify things that can be done easier, better, faster, cheaper, and so on. Okay. The good thing about understanding it as waste is when we therefore say, let's stop doing this. Let's eliminate this step, this job, this process. Then it is not about eliminating what our customer actually wants, but actually eliminating what is wasteful and therefore adds no value to the customer. And that really is the definition of waste or muda. It adds no value to the end customer. And when told about it, your customers would not pay you to do this activity. Okay. 8 different ways. So I'm going to go through these 8 quite quickly. Again, not new. Many of you may have already heard or seen some of these. As we go through this, I'm going to challenge you to think about all of this waste that you have within your own organization. But as you do that, I will also ask you to not think about how you will take them out. Don't think about the necessity to have it, because our current process and our current technology and our current assets may not today allow us to take it out. It does not mean that it is not waste, right? Our ability to take it out or not is not a determining factor for whether something is waste or not. And therefore, starting to see our own organization as having all of this waste starts to open up our eyes. Once you start to become aware of it, we can now start to do something about it. The first, inventory. Huge inventory in nearly every organization. Huge amount of inventory. Inventory is expensive, not just to purchase. If you buy inventory, much of it will get eventually used, which you will have to eventually pay for. But buying larger quantities rather than the right size adds additional cost. Cost of storage, cost of having a warehouse, cost of accounting, ensuring it is where it is. When you have inventory, some amount of it will become obsolete. It will get damaged. It will get stolen. It will get dirty. It'll have to be cleaned. It'll have to be reprocessed and so on. Inventory actually has huge cost. We think of buying larger quantities because it's cheaper. We only are looking at the actual raw material cost rather than the actual full system cost of storing something, and so on. Inventory is also not limited just to raw materials. Inventory is also limited to transactional processes. Okay, orders waiting to be processed. Anything that's waiting to be processed. Reports sitting in an inbox, transactions, and so on. Inventory, can we actually reduce it? Absolutely. Very, very close to zero is absolutely possible. First type of muda of inventory. The second, associated with inventory, is the waste of waiting. Anything that waits, any machine that waits, any person that waits, wherever there's delays. This causes hidden factories within the organization that consumes resource, builds inefficiencies. Okay. Once again, it can be on the production floor. It can be in business processes. Okay. Workflow stoppages, downtimes, and so on. Is it possible for, or just take the very simple example, when we think about waiting, we often think about an emergency room in a hospital where we have to go and wait for 5 hours. Studies have shown, lean studies have shown, that right here in Ontario, it is possible for us to eliminate nearly all waiting in all emergency rooms if only we were to change the process. Why does everybody have to wait for 5 hours? And we could very easily do this without actually adding more doctors or nurses. Actually making the process easier will make it go faster. After all, why does everybody, here's the question for us to maybe think about and take away. Why does everybody have to wait for 5 hours in an emerge to spend 10 minutes with the doctor? Okay. Why does it always have to be this way? Why can I not see a doctor 10 minutes after I arrive? Or even faster, even sooner. It is possible with the existing levels, if only we think about this process differently. The third is also a type of inventory, but we've classified this separately because it is the worst type of muda that you can have. Okay, the mother of all mudas is the muda of overproduction, where we have done things We have produced too much or too early. Now, even though producing it early sometimes seems like, well, we will sell it, the reality is that we've given up opportunity cost. Finished goods often require special handling, special packaging, special storage, and so on. Huge cost. They also have a much greater opportunity to get obsolete, to get damaged, to get stolen, to get lost, to get all of that stuff. And so all overproduction is considered muda. Once again, not only in manufacturing, but also transactional spaces as well. Overproduction of email. I have often challenged leaders and managers and organizations of all sizes. How much email do we get? How much reports do we write? How much paperwork do we do? Do we actually need all this? What do you do with this? Is there not an easier, faster, better, cheaper way for us to do things? Probably is. Overproduction, huge amount of overproduction. Some studies have shown, for instance, that indicated that 60% of all paperwork and reports that are written are never read. Nobody actually reads them. Nobody actually acts on them. It's all just pure waste. We can simplify things and focus on what really matters to our customer. Here's one that doesn't always seem very intuitive: the waste of transportation. Moving things around the plant from one end to the other. Tremendous amount of cost, tremendous amount of extra handling, conveyance vehicles, special teams doing this, and so on and so forth. Of course, along the way, they can get misplaced or lost or damaged and so on. And so lots and lots of waste of transportation. Can we actually design processes to reduce the amount of transportation? Often possible to do. Along the same lines is the waste of motion. I'm particularly passionate about this, the waste of motion. Human motion, all human motion, just our team members moving their arms, moving their limbs, bending, stretching, reaching, all of that stuff. It seems so trivial. I was in a plant yesterday in Indianapolis, and we noticed how much extra motion there was for 4 team members working on a packaging line. We simplified that line, making some very, very small structural changes. It took us only a few hours to do this. And those 4 team members were actually able to go slower. And we actually were getting close to the point where we were saying we probably can do this now in only 3, while the 3 of them would have been doing no more additional work. Why? Because the motion that they were using was actually a little bit too much. Simple redesign of this line reduced motion. All human motion is waste. And therefore, can we design work to be easy? All work to be easy. It's time to look at all activity, all motion. It all takes time and resource and cost, often possible for us to reduce. And once again, sorry, I'm just going to go back to motion. The same thing, again, true for transactional and office employees as well. Huge amount of time and effort is spent in office environments every single day looking for things, looking for information, looking for reports, looking for paperwork. And so in the absence of organization, some studies indicate 15 to 20% of office workers, knowledge workers' time is spent looking for things, looking for information all day long. Huge amount of resource, just muda throughout the organization. Here's an obvious one: the waste of defects and rework. Is it possible for us to get to 0 defect? We believe the answer is yes. If not absolutely 0, if we can get to the point of what is called a world-class 0 defect, which right now is at no more than 3 defects per 1 million. Okay, that was the goal also set by Six Sigma. Can we achieve that? Often possible to do. We will not get there tomorrow morning, but the journey is for us to get closer and closer and closer. Can we identify the root cause of every defect, including the root cause for human error? Can processes be designed so that it is more and more and more difficult for even human beings to make human error? Often possible to do that. The muda of defects and rework. Here's one that I think will resonate with everybody. The modern organization has been overcomplexified. There is a simpler, easier, faster, cheaper, better way to do nearly everything. Simple example of this. In many organizations, we see lots and lots of sign-offs, lots of approvals, many layers of approvals. And if we actually ask everybody, you approve this, what do you approve? What are you approving? It's not very clear. Roles, responsibilities, not clear. Okay, products are often over-processed as well. Processing steps are definitely over-processed. Many times it is possible for us to simplify. The essence here, once again, is simplification. Simplification of tasks. Over-processing allows us to do that. And keep in mind also, our very first concept was standard work. You can never have standard work if you have a complex work. And therefore, this waste of over-processing actually helps us to get to standard work. Design processes so they are simple, easy to be followed, easy to be documented, easy to be trained, easy to be adhered to. Now you have standard work. You're doing just the right amount of work to get the exact right product that we need. And finally, all of this. So these first 7 were process wastes. Our final Muda category. Probably the most hidden, probably the greatest Muda of all Muda, and by far the most impactful Muda is the waste of underutilized human capability. Our team members are very, very capable. Every organization, every team member in every organization is. They have more knowledge than we allow them to use often. They have more experiences than we allow them a forum to come forth with. They have more skills and they want to do more. So we often say their mind, their body, and their soul actually is capable of doing a lot more. And typically in organizations, in the industrial world, we give them a job and keep them in that location, in that one job, or in that one role, in a kind of a little bit of a box, a sandbox for them to work in, rather than allow them to get to their highest level, allow them to contribute. They want to win. They want to do well. They want to show what they're capable of doing. They want to win. And so how much do we allow our team members at the front line? And once again, I'm going to talk about my experience just this week, spending 4 days in a plant that I've never been in before, working with frontline team members. We identified so many issues and so many solutions that they already knew. All we had to do was to go and ask them, what should we do about this? They said, well, we've always said we should do it this way. Good, then do it. And we found so much improvement. In 4 days of work in this plant, I'll tell you, we actually improved output by around 3 to 4% in the product that we were making. 4 days work, 4% output increase, I think was a very, very good week spent. Easy to do, just using this concept of enabling and empowering our team members, letting them go, and they'll find us the improvements. 8 different types of waste. I'm going to move on to the third, but I'll stop and make sure that there are any questions. No questions, comments? Okay. I realize that it is 2 o'clock. I'm going to take another 10 minutes. I think, Marco, I think we'll be okay if I go to 2:10, right?
Yeah, I think we're okay with that.
Okay, super. And we'll still allow for about 20 minutes of questions and comments at the end. To get to standard work and to get us to the point where we can start to now take out Muda, start to build processes that are simpler, but also deliver better quality. It has to start, though, with our work environment, allowing us to do high quality work. And this is the space of what we call workplace organization. I'm going to be, once again, a little provocative here. I mean no disrespect to anybody. I've not been through most of your plants. I've been through Frank, but Marco there has been doing some pretty amazing work. The typical workshop, the typical work area, and not just workshop, not just plant, it's actually offices as well. It's everywhere. We don't think about the physical environment, the impact that has on people and their thinking and what they bring to work, how we are setting them up for success. Workplace organization. The story goes actually when Toyota in 1951 decided that they wanted to become a really good, high quality producer of cars, the very first thing they said was, well, how do you produce a high quality car in a plant that is messy. You just don't. If you don't give your team members an environment of excellence, it's just impossible for them to produce an excellent car. And that, I think, is applicable to every single organization. To really understand how much we empower and how much we will engage our team members, I often start by going to employee lunchrooms and washrooms and employee entrances. The entrance to a plant, if that is not even welcoming, if that is messy and dirty, the door is banged up, what message are we giving to our employees about this workplace? You're walking through a door that is not unpainted and poorly kept. You're walking past a big pail of a garbage bin that is overflowing with trash. And we're saying, welcome to work, where we do high quality work. Those two things just don't jive. That is the power of workplace organization. The starting point of having a safe, organized, and clean workplace, critical to any organization's long-term success. And this is where 5S comes in. Once again, 5S, fairly well understood. I'm sure many of you have seen this, done this, learned this already. I'm going to go through this quite quickly, but with an emphasis on understanding the underlying philosophical thinking of 5S. 5S is extremely hard to do. Very few organizations are able to sustain 5S, which really means most of us don't do 5S. We do the first 4 S's, maybe the first 3 S's at most, and they just are unable to sustain it. Why is that? Because we do it from a very true tools and very superficial perspective. So I'm going to focus on a couple of key messages. I'll go through this quite quickly. The reality is this: there is clutter everywhere. Every organization, there is clutter. Okay, whether you look at common offices, I have a few pictures here that I took in a plant that I worked in a few years ago. Common area of a plant as you walked in. Some of this mess I created, so I'll explain that a little bit later. Here's a typical office in this particular plant. Here's a typical maintenance workshop. Not much different from any workshop anywhere. Clutter is everywhere. But it's in our homes. It's in our cars. It's in our garage. It's in our closet. Look at how much extra clothes we have. Many of those clothes we just don't ever wear, and they've been hanging there for 5 years, 10 years sometimes. People move from one home to another every 5 to 7 to 8, 10 years and take boxes that they never opened in the first house and move those unopened boxes to the next. There's clutter everywhere. In a workplace, though, clutter matters. It matters because a dirty and disorganized workplace is not a safe one. And team members understand this. They see it. They see their workplace to be not a safe one. And therefore, it tells them in their mind that people here don't care. Okay. Also, work gets difficult. You're constantly looking for things. You can't find tools, supplies, parts, and so on. Work gets difficult. And when you create a workplace that is not easy to work in, the message that we're sending is that efficiency and doing good quality work really doesn't matter. Get it done somehow. Run around, get it done. It is also not a positive, inspiring workplace. Nobody likes to go and work in a dirty, disorganized workplace. No human being deserves it either. And so if we expect to make high quality product and be an excellence organization while walking into the workspace is not absolutely clean, those two things, once again, just doesn't work. And coming back to my very first point, it's impossible for us to standardize work process if you do not have a standardized workplace. And that is the reason why we have 5S. 5S is a technique, it is a tool. But more importantly, to create a three words here, I'd like everybody to keep in mind: safe, organized, and clean workplace. That has to be the starting point for any excellence journey. If you do not have those 3 things, absolutely safe, totally organized, and spotlessly clean, forget about the rest. Okay, I'm going to say this proactively, just forget about the rest. Okay, because it's impossible for you to standardize, and without standardization, it's impossible for you to improve. And so it's a lean concept, tool, technique for sure, but it's also a culture, a thinking, a philosophy, a belief, something that as leaders we have to bring to our organization. We call it 5S because it's a 5-step process. 5 Japanese words. I'm not going to teach you all 5 of these words. We found in English equivalents also starting in S. Sort, set in order, shine, sweep, standardize, and sustain. Very, very simple, very logical, commonsensical. It'll take us no more than a few minutes to understand these. It'll take us a lifetime to build the discipline to do them. And that is, I think, the most important takeaway from 5S for me. 5S is really not just about organization of workplace. It is about building discipline. And I often say this to team members and to leaders. If in an organization, if we as human beings, if we have not taught and trained ourselves to pick up a screwdriver from a particular location and put it back exactly there, forget about making the exact perfect window every single day, day after day, hour after hour. Just will not happen. And so 5S has got to be thought about as we organize the workplace to do one thing, to teach us to be disciplined. That is the critical lesson in 5S. To go through these 5S's, first step is sort. Sort is about challenging yourself. Challenge yourself to throw away things you don't need. We all have too much of everything. In the lean world, a saying from Tehra is the more you have equals having less of what you actually need. So what you don't need, you need to get rid of. Find out what work takes place, what tools you need, and how often those tools are needed. On the basis of this, only things that you need on a daily and weekly basis to support standard work must be in the workplace, must be within arm's reach. Everything else should be either thrown away if it's rarely or never used, or if it's infrequently used, it goes further and further away from the workplace, store it in the appropriate location. The second step then is you set an order. Only things that you need is what you set in order. Set in a way that makes it easy for people to work. The operative word here is easy. Make work easy. Only then can we ensure that the exact work will happen every single day, every hour of every day. Right place for every item. Minimizing motion, the muda of motion, eliminate stretching, bending, reaching, inventory, making work easy. This is done by understanding how the work is flowing, where things belong, and how they will be stored. Keeping them in the right place at all times is an important part of setting in order. In the end, a place for everything and everything in its place. Setting in order often looks like rooms being organized, everything marked, labeled, all the bits and pieces in place. Makes such a better looking, more efficient, and disciplined workplace. Third step then is shine. Shine is certainly about cleaning. But the point of shine is a lot more than just housekeeping and spring cleaning. This means that you make the place ready for inspection. Every organization I go to, they spend time when you have visitors, when you have customers, when you have inspectors, ISO audits, and so on. But we don't think about ourselves as being auditors. We don't think about team members to say, you are the number one auditor. Why should we spend hours and hours getting ready for an auditor who will be here for an hour, but spend no time for ourselves when we'll be here for forever, right? Over 8 hours a day, okay? Shine is ultimately about driving accountability. This is my space. This is my plant. I care about it. It is about building care and belongingness to the plant. This is why shine has to be done by the team that's actually involved and work in that space, scrubbing their own floors, cleaning the machines, fixtures, paint the walls if needed. Okay, this is about taking ownership. Shine. The first 3 steps: sort, set an order, shine. This will get you there. You do the first 3 steps, and you will have a safe, organized, and clean workplace. Unfortunately, it will not stay there. Having done these 3, therefore, the next step then is standardize. Here is now standardization work all over again. We started by talking today about the need for standard work. 5S, you can see here, actually teaches us how to standardize. Standardization, the result of doing the first 3, requiring teamwork, collaboration, and discipline. Learn to set a standard, a visual standard that clearly shows, keeping it simple and interesting, where things should be. Everything, therefore, in its right place. Okay, using shadow boards, borderlines, steps, colors, signs, outlines, whatever you need to. This is the standard. If you have a physical standard in the workspace around you, then people will automatically gravitate to having a standard of what you're doing as well, the invisible work as well. That is the power of standardization. If you have a standard, will everybody follow it? For a while, yes. And then entropy sets in, which is why you need sustain. Sustain, which is about now going to self-discipline. This is the most important and difficult step. Remember, this is 5S, not 3S or 4S. You must therefore do something to sustain your 5S effort. In doing this, we often say these two words really important for me, to apply some positive tension. This is not about penalizing people. Audits often have a negative connotation. We actually say sustain should be positive. Let's help each other out to keep the area safe, organized, and clean. Okay, driving therefore self-discipline. Weekly audits, if not daily, critical. Doesn't take long. Weekly audit, no more than 15 minutes. Daily audits, 5 minutes. Very, very worthwhile to do. Doing that will give you results that look like this. Offices, and this, once again, pictures that I took in a 5S that we implemented in a plant, a really, really old, very, very messy plant. They've been around for 40 years and pretty much had never been cleaned. Offices that go from looking like this to looking like this. And no, this person was not fired, but I think a lot more efficient because they actually had space on their desk. Look at where would they work on this desk? Look at all that clutter. This is what they actually needed. A common area. Now, some of that mess I threw out here, which is why this is looking extra dirty, but common areas that go looking like this to clean, organized, welcoming. Maintenance shops that go from looking like this. And I've been told many times, this doesn't look too bad. Well, we disagreed to going to looking like this. Maintenance shops can be like this. And they did a remarkable job of maintaining this, by the way. And maintenance tool rooms that go from looking like this, clean, organized, things are in place, easy to find. 3 things that I wanted to introduce to everybody today: the need for standard work, the need for us to have 5S in place, and then start the journey of continuously identifying and removing Muda. That was our journey to excellence, part 2. I'm going to stop here a few moments over schedule, but I'd love to open up to any questions or comments before I hand it back over to Marco.
So I guess thank you very much for your time, and thank you for describing all those activities. I guess taking a step back, now we know that standardizing work is important, identifying waste, as well as going through the 5S process. In terms of scale, and if you're new to something like this and you haven't been on any kind of Kaizen events or you're just starting your lean journey, how would you say is the best way to approach continuous improvement in terms of scale? Is it as small as, understanding the flow of an email internally? Is it looking at one workstation, or should we be taking a wider look and saying, okay, these are the types of waste we see throughout the facility, and we're going to address all of them simultaneously? So essentially, how do we get small wins, and what would you suggest?
Yeah, Marco, really, really good question. The reason I picked these 3 was because I strongly believe, and the research is once again showing the exact same thing. This is the starting point. Okay. Kaizen, everybody likes to do Kaizen. Everybody likes that term, that concept of spend a few hours, a few days in a room and doing Kaizen. Kaizen requires a level of maturity in an organization, though. Okay. When you get there, it'll be very easy. But to try and do it prematurely will be very, very challenging to both do and to sustain. The starting point, though, is if we have done nothing so far, or this starting point for our journey, I would strongly recommend starting with 5S. Why is that? Because, as I said earlier, teach us discipline, and it's visual. It's visual. People see the change. If I make a change in a process, only 1 or 2 people may see it. But if I make a change in the work environment, everybody walks into that maintenance shop. Think about that. In that maintenance shop, everybody walks into that maintenance shop and suddenly sees, whoa, something has happened here, right? This is so much better. They walk into that tool storage room and say, oh, I can find everything I need. So much easier than having to open up drawers and look around and still not find things. So 5S has got to be a starting point. If you're familiar with Kaizen and you think you can do it in a Kaizen format, use that format to do even 5S. Once you've done that, then I think it will be time for you to start looking at process. And the right way, of course, to look at it from any organization's point is, and again, process can be looked at various levels. The starting point we often recommend, it's a rule of thumb, not an edict, is you should look at your own organization from door to door. Okay, look at it from one end to the other. Look at one order and how it flows, and then get your team involved. So one other thing that I'm going to add between these two steps is a little bit of investment in training is important. Everybody's got to be part of the journey. Everybody's got to understand these terms, understand what we're doing. And that's the only way that they will get involved as well. And when they get involved, it'll get easy.
And are there any other questions or anyone have their hands up currently?
I don't see any questions.
Okay, so just from my personal experience then, so we've been on this kind of 5S journey, and just to not discourage anyone, I guess I'll start from the beginning kind of. I took courses and I was under the impression that, you go through these steps and the issue is going to correct itself and people are going to be disciplined and, we'll just move on to the next thing. That's a very naive way of looking at a problem, especially if it's a broad problem that affects the organization. And to think that within like a year timeline, a major project can be executed and you're going to be 5S throughout the organization. The reality is it is not a short process. It is difficult. It is challenging, and it always takes at least twice as long as you think it's going to take. I can honestly say getting through the first the first 3 S's has been at least a 2-year journey. And we're kind of focusing on the last 2. So I think that keeping momentum is critical, and identifying key stakeholders within the organization that are going to spearhead all these initiatives. You have to have buy-in, and you have to have people who are going to be willing to take the initiative, but also follow through and keep morale high. Otherwise, you're going to get to sweep, and then it's going to be a lot of junk you're throwing out, and people are going to get bogged down with that. It's difficult, but you have to keep positivity, but also realize that it is not a short process.
Yeah,
I guess that was more of a comment. And the next thing I wanted to ask, how can I say this? Actually, anything to add on that? Sorry, no.
So yes, and we have a question as well that has been asked. So I'm going to say yes, absolutely. 5S is, so you can see here, very commonsensical, very easy to understand. Yeah, we got to do this. This resonates with most of us, and yet very, very difficult to do. So Marco, I will say this: many ways of implementing 5S. Most organizations fail at it. I will also say this the same breath.
Okay.
And so we have learned that there is a way of getting success. You will have to invest some time, some effort. But I think the biggest investment has got to be to change people's mindset and their view on these things, right? And the engagement of team members. So I often say, probably better for you to divvy up your plant, your organization into areas and start area at a time. This is a fundamental shift in human behavior. That human behavior shift will require a concerted effort, but you can get there. I typically give 4 weeks for a team, a small team in one area, one line, one set of work centers. I'm going to give you 4 weeks. 4 weeks to get your first 3 done. At the end of those 4 weeks, when you've done your first 3, we will standardize and we will sustain based on whatever you have done. Okay. But during those 4 weeks, you have to take something off their plate to allow them to do it. They cannot do it in addition to everyday work already, because they already have plenty of work to do. And so, Alan, to your question, Should you start every day with 15 minutes of continuous, 15, 30 minutes of continuous? Absolutely, absolutely great idea. The concept of the daily morning meeting, DMM, or start of shift, whatever, and the various names, the huddle, some people call it toolbox talks, and so on and so forth. Another lean tool. Great way for you to once again emphasize, for you to look at your goals for the day, and for you to identify here's things that we need to work on during the course of the day, or spend 15 minutes and ensure that everything is 5S before you start. Similarly, give everybody 10 minutes at the end of the day. You leave the workshop. If you have a single shift, my recommendation is you leave everything 5S. So in the morning, you walk into a place that is clean, organized, and safe. Therefore, starting up with only a 10-minute startup talk, and maybe 5 minutes of what problems do we have, what additional things do we have that we need to work on from a continuous improvement perspective. If you have a 2 or 3 shift operation, same thing applies, but this time you can also do a shift-to-shift handoff. So outgoing shift always gives a safe, organized, and clean workplace as per standard. And that is what the supervisors need to audit before your team members leave, setting those expectations and then keeping them there. Okay, I hope that helps. Marco, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, that's great. And if there's no other questions from anyone else, it doesn't seem that there is. I just had again, going to the starting of this whole process. It's difficult, it's challenging, but it's definitely doable. The apprehension is, hey, and I guess it's kind of pejorative to go with consultants. I know that yourself as a consultant, and people are always, you only focus on the negative experiences, but obviously you've had a lot of positive experiences and you've enacted a lot of change throughout organizations. So if somebody were to say, hey, I need a consultant, or no, I don't need a consultant, what would be your kind of take if somebody is starting this lean journey? Is it absolutely necessary that they get a consultant, or is it just advisable to kind of get somebody in there to kind of just point them in the direction, what they need to work on? What would you think it would be the best approach?
Okay, really good question, Marco. I'm going to give you my honest and sincere advice here. No consultant can get you to excellence. This is your organization's journey. This is your leadership journey. Okay. You have to, we started this conversation and the conversation in March with, this is a leadership choice. Okay. This is the leadership work, which has to happen within. And today we've talked about this, and I think we talked about it in March as well. Your teams are capable of doing this, and they want to do this. It is within the organization. You can do it. If you do not have, this is no different from going to a gym. If you do not have the will to go to the gym, hiring a trainer who's going to tell you what to do when you get to the gym, very limited true benefit. But if you're committed, then along the way, you may need some input, but it has to start with you. The work has to be done by the organization. You may need a trainer to help you bring in some ideas and concepts and so on. But your teams know your problems. Your team knows your organization. Reality is, I could not come into your organization, despite doing this for 20 years. Marco, I could not come in and do a 5S in your organization because I would not have the slightest clue about where a particular screwdriver should go, because I have never done that job. Your team members 100% know. So it's a matter of enabling and empowering and inspiring your team members to do it. Okay. So with that, Marco, maybe I hand it off to you for final closing comments. Oh, sorry, Naveen. It seems like Naveen, you had your hand up?
Good question. Yep.
Please go ahead.
Naveen?
Are you muted? Okay. Well, I mean, if there was a question later on, don't hesitate. You can reach out. Oh, you don't have controls to mute or unmute.
I think I got it now.
Okay, good. There we go. We
Got
can
it.
hear.
Hey, Neil, how are you?
Very good. Thanks. How are you?
Good, good, good. It was pretty good. It's very exciting to hear all this conversation, and it's lots of great information. Thank you for that. And so I'm calling. Basically, I'm joining from Durable Windows and Doors. Certain advice, like we know all this lean fundamentals, how to do this. We have this information. While implementing, we all know that it's not easy. And so my belief is that first we have to figure out the way to provide right resources to people before we actually hold them accountable. So what we kind of struggle sometimes, let's say we have 10 new joinees. Now the hand tools, like what are your advice? Whether is it good practice to leave the tools on their place? Is it good practice to leave the tools in their personal lockers? Or like, what do you see as your industry experience? What we feel as challenges is every now and then, let's say, take a simple example of a mallet. This guy comes to me, okay, I don't have my mallet. Okay, where is your mallet? I don't know. Somebody took it. Who took it? No idea. So now holding them accountable, we even thought of to implementing RFID for tool tracking so that people have the right tools on right place all the time. What's your opinion on this?
A difficult question. I mean, I'll be honest with you, because every organization is different and you've got to think about it from your own perspective. I'll give you my opinion on this at a broad level. It does not mean that it is 100% applicable to you. Putting RFIDs, the message for me to your team is, I don't trust you. So I'm going to track it. And the only thing that we've done is for somebody who wants to steal, they say, well, I'll show you I can do it even with RFID, right? You think you're going to stop me? I think there is a bigger question here, right? Like, how do we build that trust? Okay, how do we build that respect? If they don't respect you, say, here's the real question to me. And I know we're nearly out of time and I have a 2:30, so I do have to run. Happy to take this offline with you, but here's the question for us. If they are stealing tools, then what else are they doing?
No, actually, they are not stealing. Honestly, there might be 1 out of 100 who maybe stole, but it's being the careless attitude of handling stuff.
Right. Like that requires discipline. See, but that has to be answered by them understanding why we need discipline, why we need 5S, and what is the right way of doing things. That has to be there so you've right away, you've negated your need for RFID, right? I think that's the right approach. Okay, I think we're out of time, Naveen, but we're happy to take this offline, reach out, and we'll have a separate conversation.
Thank you so much, Anil, for joining us. Also, this presentation will be posted online for anyone who couldn't attend. And yeah, thank you for everyone for attending.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Marco. Thank you, everybody.
Marco.
Bye.